Good morning, Bitcoiners. Sun's up. I checked. Bitcoin's running. We can have our coffee and talk about the news. So, the biggest story of the day, of course, we just missed it yesterday. It's the Tulsi Gabbard story. Tulsi Gabbard, of course, a congresswoman who ran for the Democrat nomination for president last time around, and yesterday made a very dramatic declaration followed by an appearance on Rogan. We're going to get to that, but we've got a few other news stories we're tracking first, just because, they're funny. The first one is our favorite legend, our hero from summer vacation. A couple of young college students this summer found a loophole and probably the greatest summer job I've ever heard of. There's been a bunch of these gun buyback sessions all over America, so municipalities, and it's happening in Canada too, I guess. Municipalities and different states have been offering to repurchase guns from people if they turn them in order, logically to get the total amount of guns down is their logic. So these kids went and 3D printed pieces of guns and learned in the end that they didn't even need to put the guns together. They were bringing them in pieces. They were bringing the guns in pieces to these buyback events and getting what they wanted, which was, where's my story on that? I thought I printed it. I'm looking for the exact quote. Well, so it turns out that the state of, here we go. So it turns out that New York's Attorney General has changed the rules, so the state gun buyback program can't be exploited by these 3D printer kids anymore. And so they went around and did it, state by state all summer. There was, some states said, oh, we have $100,000 for gun buyback. Come and bring your guns in. And a lot of the times this money never gets used, and not enough people show up to turn their guns in. So they'll be left with 50, 60, 70K of 100K allotment to buy back guns. So these clever kids, just college students, went all around and printed pieces. The material costs would be like $100, and then they would go and get cash money. So they were getting pretty famous for it. I've talked about it on this show. I tell people about it all the time. It's just one of the best summer jobs I ever heard of. When people were asking me this summer, how's their summer going? I said, well, I got the farm. I'm taking it easy. I had, it's the first summer I haven't had a summer job in a long time. You start talking about summer jobs, and every single time I'd say, did you hear about this one summer job these kids made for themselves? The best, right? Really fun. So, I got kids running around. So these guys, really some fun folks. We're going to be talking more about the Joe Rogan interview with Tulsi Gabbard in a few minutes, but I do want to mention, because if you haven't seen it, go look at it right away. Someone used AI to replicate a Joe Rogan and Steve Jobs interview. Now, there's some problems with it. They have more audio quality from Joe Rogan, and his voice comes off as really authentic because he's doing his show, which is he's mastered sort of his normal voice, whereas Steve Jobs still has the presentation voice sort of infused, because I guess all of the source info where they were creating the AI composite of Steve Jobs was, all the input had that voice in it because they just used his speeches. They didn't get a lot of off script and off the cuff stuff. But nevertheless, and there was even an AI sort of weird, quirky mistake when Joe Rogan started. He said, "You're welcome to the Bro Jogan show." The Bro Jogan. It actually works. The Bro Jogan show. So the Bro Jogan show, his stuff sounded good. He repeated himself a lot. He said a few things that were the same, but if it's an indication of where things are going, and I saw one really similar just a few days ago, and if you haven't seen this one, please look out for it. It's a fella who used both a voice simulator and deepfake technology, showed that his room was, his podcast room was no good. He's like, okay, I got backlight, I got all these things, this is low budget. But his voice sounded exactly like Joe Rogan, and he looked like a young Keanu Reeves. So he used the deepfake for his face to look like Keanu Reeves, and he used the voice simulator to sound like Joe Rogan. So it was a young Keanu Reeves speaking like Joe Rogan, and he said he was making it with just basic off the shelf, readily retail available technology. And he said there's about a half a second lag between him speaking with his normal face and his normal voice and it coming across as young Keanu Reeves speaking with bro Jogan's voice and Joe Rogan's voice. So look, from now on, don't believe anything you see on video. I mean, it can be so confusing. If you hear an audio clip, if you see or hear anything and it's very dramatic and out of what you would expect and out of your prediction range, we're going to talk about it here. Obviously, we're going to be following almost all of these stories of mistaken AI identity. A field that I've been working in for almost as long now as Bitcoin is AI. So I have some knowledge. I wrote a book called The Satoshi Wedding Murders, which will be coming out shortly, about AI and Bitcoin and the cross-section and where things could head. So it's just a murder mystery, a science fiction story, nothing, nothing academic or anything like that. It should just be a fun story, written, trying to, publish, and we'll get there soon. So AI and the Joe Rogan piece. So now let's get to Tulsi Gabbard for the day. So Tulsi, as we said before, was a congresswoman. She ran for the presidential nomination. She was part of the Dem primaries back in 2020. And her and the other fella started the Forward Party. We've interviewed him. I can't. His name is Andrew Yang. So Andrew Yang and her were kind of the standouts because they were both saying, this Democrat Party's got to change. It's not going to work. And they both got a lot of attention. So he's gone on to create his own party. He was at our Bitcoin show last year in Miami, and I think we're going to invite him again this year. He's created something called the Forward Party. Some people saying Tulsi will go over there, but it doesn't look like it. Doesn't look like it, and we're going to get to that. We're going to speculate a bit on Tulsi Gabbard and her future. So Tulsi released a statement yesterday and the reasons why she's walking away from the Democrat Party. And walk away has been a Democrat Party or a slogan for the Democrat Party and the people walking away for quite a while now. There's a few. Brandon Straka is the leader of that movement. So all kinds of folks are a part of that walk away. They call themselves classical liberals. Dave Rubin would be another one. The Rubin Report, really good news channel that you can catch on YouTube. And he's also the creator of Locals, which is the paid subscription service that Rumble uses. So, he's got all kinds of business interests in order to create basically platforms for people like himself. These liberal refugees are, I guess, what they call themselves. So Tulsi Gabbard released a statement on Twitter explaining all of her reasons, which you could agree with or disagree with, but they were her reasons. And I think she said them really clearly. And she followed it up immediately with a Joe Rogan Experience interview where she probably gave, and I listened to it. If you haven't listened to it yet, we'll go over bits and pieces of it, but she probably gave the most full-throated, clear criticism of the military-industrial complex that we've heard in America since Eisenhower gave his farewell address in 1960. Yeah, 1960. So Eisenhower being the president of the United States from 52 to 60, and when he left office, and he was a great general, and all he said, look, he wasn't a guy who was anti-military. Obviously, he was the supreme commander of the Allied forces during World War II, and had a long career afterwards. And his whole idea was he knew the military better than anyone and knew what they were up to. And he wasn't saying this is a moral thing. They're not trying to grab control of the world. They just need war. They need it to make money. And he believed that when Kennedy was elected, that almost all of his work on disarmament, he was a big disarmament guy. He believed all of his work was for nothing because John F. Kennedy was elected on a platform of something called the missile gap. So he got everyone upset about America having fewer and less powerful missiles, intercontinental ballistic missiles and whatever rocket technology was going on, than the Soviets. So Eisenhower came out and said, there's no such thing as a missile gap. He flew the B-52 bombers over Russia. He said, we have nothing to worry about. We know what they have. Yeah, they could try and cause some trouble, but we would wipe them out. And he was probably correct, and said that any amount of fear you hear in the system is really just about them trying to pad budgets and basically propagate their industry. And he warned everyone in America that it was the wrong choice. Now, he had, it's easy to say that he was anti-military and all this stuff. As I understand, his philosophy was the following. He had given a lot of leeway to a man named Edward Bernays. And Bernays was a brander, a marketer. And it looks like they made a conscious decision to infuse Americans with consumer culture, because consumer culture would be the engine required to keep the military infrastructure on a war footing, that it can be pivoted immediately. So Eisenhower's idea was, we don't need a standing army. If we have standing consumer base, we can pivot, as we did in World War II, to make all of those car factories and all the other factories that they used to become actually weapons suppliers. So he gave Bernays a lot of leeway into massaging Americans out of the Great Depression mentally, and massaging them from frugality to consumerism. And it looked like a good strategy. As long as America remained the greatest consumer economy in the world, the military would be able to pivot instantly. What we ended up getting, and I think this is where Eisenhower, I'm mind reading here, this is me putting my own words into it, but what it looks like is Eisenhower wanted disarmament. The backup plan for disarmament was high consumer output, high consumer industrial base, and in the end, he got the worst of both worlds. He got the consumer base, but it wasn't just for war, it just perpetuated. Instead of making stuff in those factories, they sent all of the consumer manufacturing offshore, and continued to make the weapons in the United States, and continued to want the war. So it looks like, from Eisenhower's point of view, his bet failed. But now we've got Tulsi Gabbard, who, as I said, gave probably, maybe I'm wrong, but it sounds like the second most important speech outing the military-industrial complex we've ever heard. And she didn't do it with, wild, this is what they're doing. She said that simply, they need it. They need these conflicts in order to have a business plan. And it makes sense the way she said it. So she timed the Joe Rogan experience, and the Joe Rogan experience has sort of references this military-industrial complex speech from Eisenhower all the time. It's a well-known thing, right? If you haven't heard about it before, it's a well-known speech. Go have a look at it. So she ends up giving the second most important speech on the issue. And right away, it made me think. How do we get Tulsi Gabbard's voter base? How do we get Tulsi Gabbard's voter base on the Bitcoin train? How do we attract them in a way that isn't about Bitcoiners adopting Republican strategies? How do we get those Democrat refugees to be part of a movement that's both compatible with Bitcoin and useful politically, and can help move votes and wipe out the Democrat Party? So the idea I got on this comes from a book called The Righteous Mind. And so The Righteous Mind is the title, and a fellow named Jonathan Haidt wrote it. Haidt, H-A-I-D-T. I don't really know how to pronounce it. So The Righteous Mind, Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion. And the book argues that, of course, the vast majority of liberals are not what Republicans or right-wing people who have been inundated with brainwashing believe they are, right? They're not interested unanimously with post-birth abortion and extreme points of view, right? There is no consensus among the Democrat Party that all those things are good. Now, there's a lot of people you'll see on Twitter who are jacked and totally infused with the dopamine delivery system of self-righteousness, and that's kind of what he gets into in this book. It's the righteousness on either side, right? On either side, just like you get these Democrat opinions of Republicans that they are, MAGA fascists and ultra fascists, or a fascist, all the fascist adjacent stuff they go on about, right? So neither of those, we all know, if you're at all outside of the bubble, if you're outside of the religion and the high church of either the Republican or Democrat Party, you know that most Americans agree on 99.9% of things. They did before politics was saturated in every part of our life, and they will again one day when Bitcoin takes over. But for now, we've got to deal with people as they are. And what this book argues is that the left and right-wing debate, it's not even really argument. It's almost a genetic component that people are born, right? Just like we say people are born with sexuality oriented in a certain way, or all those things. Or in this book, they argue that politics are actually almost in your DNA. They're almost in your DNA. And we've heard Andrew Yang say the same thing, right? That the way forward is not to argue this stuff. It's not to load up on one side of every argument that's already got a pitched battle in front of it, like gun control and abortion and all these things. And it's to find a new way that is sympathetic to the point of view of the other side, and then incorporates it and actually steers it into a positive direction. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to steer policies that would normally be, that are important to Democrats, right? That are important to a voter base. We're going to talk about Tulsi's own particular voter base being open to some of these ideas, and then we're going to give some of our examples on how to turn her voter base into based Bitcoiners. So I think I can do it. All right, I think I can do it. And by that, I mean, we're not going to run this Tulsi Democrat voter base into head-on Republican issues. We're not going to try to take Republican arguments and bring them to Democrats because the shields are up. It's probably not going to work. We got to come up with another way. I came up with the Ouroboros snake, and how do you make it eat itself? How do you take a policy, and instead of going in one direction, how do you push it in the other direction and almost neutralize it and make it go away? I think I can do it. So how do we break the religious doctrine that pitches everyone against each other? So let's try with a few different issues, a few different important policy matters that Democrats think are really important, have been told are really important, and let's find a third rail, a Bitcoin way, in order to turn that voter base into based Bitcoiners. So first, gun control, right? How do we use gun control to help Tulsi, to help Bitcoiners, and to destroy the issue as it is today? Well, I have one answer, right? And tell me if you agree. I don't know. We'll see. But it's not to say, oh, guns here, guns there. Here's the answer. I believe this. It'll sound like a joke, but I mean it. The answer to gun control is to give the Democrats what they want. All right? This is what I mean. If Democrats don't think they should have guns, then they shouldn't. So in my policy, if you register Democrat, you're not allowed to have a gun anymore. That comes with the deal, right? So we're going to have gun control. And if you look at the statistics, right, Democrats, they commit a lot of crimes. So in my policy, if you're a registered Democrat, right, if you're a registered Democrat, it comes with a gun buyback. You got to give your gun back. You're not allowed guns anymore. So we're going to have gun control. We're going to have strict gun control, absolute gun control for registered Democrats. They can't have a gun. None. Right? So we're going to get gun control in America this way. Anyone who's a Democrat, your guns are gone. Everyone else lives under the same system, but they're going to promote this system and they're going to go with it. We saw yesterday in Arizona, remember, I've been telling you to pay attention to the Arizona governor race. So now they've got folks chasing this Democrat candidate around, and Project Veritas did a spy cam. If you don't know what Project Veritas is, it's sort of like a spy cam, kind of a news thing. they try to get gotcha stuff and secret images, and it's pretty entertaining stuff. So they got friendly with Carrie Lake's, sorry, not Carrie Lake, the woman she's against, the Democrat candidate, who's been avoiding debating and had those really awful answers we discussed yesterday vis-a-vis the Latino population. Like, I have Latino friends was her answer. The zero policies, being interviewed by a Latino interviewer, just saying that that's all you got. And then it was, she had no answers. So now Project Veritas dropped the videos yesterday. They got into the campaign. They found her driver. He was, her driver. So she's a gun control person and all this stuff. So they found her driver. They have secret, hidden camera video of the driver, of her driver in the car, pointing out his AR-15 and saying that's much easier to shoot than a handgun. I keep it loaded right there. So her driver keeps an AR-15, the one they're trying to ban all over the place, instead of a handgun. Had all kinds of logic to it. They have another shot where the driver is, once the spy guy comes out and says who he is, you see this gubernatorial candidate running with the guy who had the gun still in the car, but they're running to the car with the gun, and this journalist is behind them. So it's really funny stuff. So, so you've got, gun control. I think give them what they want. Just give them what they want, right? I think every Republican could get behind that, gun control, right? And if Tulsi would bring a policy like that forward, saying, we're going to have the most important gun control legislation in the history of the United States, and she could deliver it. She could deliver it with the Republicans, right? Full gun buyback from all Democrats. If you are a registered Democrat, you no longer have a right to a gun. Practice what you preach, right? Practice what you preach. Next, defund the police, right? That was a big issue. You see in a lot of these midterms, everyone having to walk back on defund the police that are Democrats, and the Republicans saying, look at these people, they don't want police. And a lot of Democrat candidates are having to talk out of both sides of their mouth. No. This was the Democrat Party's best idea, was defund the police. So she should go with that one, right? She should, if she does move Republican, she should oppose anyone who says defund the police is a terrible idea and offer experiments. And by experiments, I mean, well, maybe we'll try it in this city. Maybe we'll try it in that city. I lived in New York when the defund the police started and the police became defunded. I left, right? I support the policy, but I'm not going to stay in New York while they're experimenting with it. It was awful. It was terrible, right? Crime everywhere, not livable anymore. I've got little kids. That doesn't mean I don't support the plan. I just can't live in New York City anymore. Now, if other cities want to try that, they're free to. And I think it's going to work out in the long run, because we know now that people protecting themselves with cameras, we're going to be recording everything. In my story, when I talked about that story between AI and Bitcoin, in my story, everyone has an eyeball, and the eyeball, which is an AI floating orb, conversational, it's your friend, it helps you detect fake news, it helps you with everything, right? Helps you get money, helps you, and manages your Bitcoin wallet for you, basically. So the eyeballs that follow everyone around actually prevent crime. There's almost no crime in my story, almost no crime, because the eyeball is simply recording everything. And just as we see today, everyone has cameras. But moreover, we see now that with genetic testing, so many crimes, rape and all that, is almost undoable, right? Because with the advances in genetic testing, you can find people like 4 or 5 people removed in relations. Like, you can find from a family tree. So if there's one criminal in a person's family, I think they can go to like, like 3rd, 4th, 5th cousins and know that it's you. So they don't need your DNA. They just are able to break it down much, much better now. So I think anyway, despite defund the police, right? Defund the police, okay, but technology is going to take care of it. We're going to have genetic testing, cameras that should basically limit it. Then what do we do about some other guys? Well, I think we're entering an era of bounty hunters anyway. We're headed to the era of bounty hunters. And it doesn't mean that the laws are gone, but if you want to get justice and arrest someone and hold someone accountable for the law, I think you'll be able to hire a bounty hunter. You can do it already. I think it's just going to perpetuate and continue. So I don't think she should talk about the bounty hunter issue. I think that just sounds cool to Bitcoiners. But Defund the police, cameras are there, the genetic testing is much, much better, and I think we'll be safe. I think right now, currently, as we adjust to defund the police, it's probably a little dangerous, but I think in the long run, it's for the best. In the long run, it's for the best. And I have the utmost respect for police who put their lives on the line and do all that stuff. I really do. But I think we don't need them anymore. I think we're getting to the point where we don't need them anymore. And especially if Democrats are disarmed, right? If any registered Democrat is disarmed, it will just naturally take the overall population of criminals down, right? It's a lot of people who are registered Democrats. So right away, you've got a big opportunity there. All right, energy. So what we've seen with the energy debate so far is obviously crazy, but we had some big changes, and I think the door is open now. The door is open for a more Democrat policy. Even Greta, Greta, who I'd say is mostly responsible now for all the trouble in Europe, right? They followed her plan. She was opposed to nuclear before, but she came out yesterday saying, well, actually, nuclear is good, right? It's fine. If it's already on, we shouldn't be burning coal, so let's go with it. So the good news here is Greta gave the okay for nuclear. Greta gave the okay. So now it looks like the Democrats can just do it, right? We had Jamie Dimon yesterday as well, giving the okay. He launched a whole bunch of truth bombs yesterday. He was based Jamie Dimon, the one that should have joined Bitcoin years ago and instead is insane and goes on about how it's worthless while he's clearly working with it. So here he goes and says, we're getting energy completely wrong. Jamie Dimon, if you don't know Jamie Dimon, he's the CEO of JP Morgan. So JP Morgan Chase, I guess it's the biggest bank in America. I think it is. And he's one of the few super rich bankers. A lot of bankers aren't super rich, but he is super rich. So Jamie Dimon argues that green energy fantasy has made the climate worse and that we have it completely backwards. So he went off. So I think between Jamie Dimon and Greta, she's got an opportunity to open up, that whole voter base against oil and embracing nuclear energy. And if she adopts a Bitcoin financing plan or policy or promotes one, we'll be even better off. Next is education. So, of course, Americans are regularly stressed about education. They're, one second here, let me just get my notes. They're stressed about education and, basically, huge fights are going on in the United States between charter schools and the public education system. Democrats are absolutely owned by the teachers unions because they're huge donors. So here the answer is very simple for her. If we believe Black Lives Matter, right? If we believe Black Lives Matter, which I'm assuming she does, right? She's never been. She talked about racism against white people in her thing yesterday, but I don't think that changes her reputation as not a racist person, right? I don't think she has a reputation of being prejudiced or biased against anyone. So she comes out and says, basically, the education system is where we find institutional racism in America. It is, right? If anyone is wondering if America has huge pockets of racism and whether or not there's institutional racism in America, look no further than American school system. It's obvious. Look at the results. Where do they put the crappy teachers, right? There was a movie made years ago called Waiting for Superman, and it was about a Black inner city, best intentions fella who was gonna be the guy. He was gonna go through his education, become a teacher. He was going to go into the system and he was going to fix it, right? So he did all that. He goes into the system and he realizes the system itself is almost unfixable. And the reason it was called Waiting for Superman is because that's sort of the position that everyone gets into. Everyone goes into it with these great intentions. And I don't doubt that 99% of people in a teachers union do want good results for their students. I wouldn't deny that. right? I'm not accusing teachers union members of wanting bad outcomes for kids. I'm not accusing them of that, right? If that's what you're hearing, that public school teachers don't want kids to get educated, and that's where the racism is manifesting, that's not what I'm saying, right? I'm saying that bad schools are dumping for teachers that are part of a union and unfireable. I'm saying that teachers will go to where, as you could imagine, where their seniority and their accomplishments let them perform, and very happy to teach Black students. I'm certain of it, right? I'm certain of that. So it's not the type of conscious racism that I think a lot of people peddle in and accuse others of. Institutional racism in this case is actually made up of a bunch of people actually doing their best, except the system sucks and the results are terrible. So that makes it institutional racism. And the only way out of that institutional racism is to break the unions. They're the teachers' unions. They're not the student. They're not there for the students. They're there for the teachers, right? And everyone can understand why. You know, being a teacher is a hard job, and they probably require negotiating rights and collective bargaining and all those things that help them at one point. But what she can do now is just get on the train of breaking the union and embracing charter and voucher schools, which I think most Bitcoiners would be down with. I think most Bitcoiners are into homeschooling and into charter and into voucher. And it is one of those things where you're not going straight into Republicans, you're going around. And there isn't an argument if you go around in this way. So that's another one. What about abortion? Right? What about abortion? How, you know, it looks like abortion is going to be a huge issue in the upcoming election. So where do Bitcoiners fall into that, right? What can we do on the abortion debate? How can we help, right? Basically move the sticks in a way that will be good for Bitcoin. Not necessarily on the abortion policy, but where do you go, right? It's caught between pro-choice, pro-life. They're all fighting all the time. How do we get Tulsi's voters? How do we get her base attracted to the party? Do we argue in one side of abortion? Of course not. It's never going to work. But what can we do, right? Do we still have a plan? I think so, right? I think so. How do we go from being, let's say, more extreme, even more extreme, let's say, than Democrat people? How do we push these Democrats not into Republicans, not convincing them that Republicans have it right and Democrats have it wrong? How do we do it? Well, there is a way. There is a third rail option, and it's this. Basically, so who would typify a left-wing abortion stance for males, right? Oh, I got one. I think Dave Portnoy was criticizing Roe v. Wade, and that's someone who we all know and is a Bitcoiner, right? Well, how about this? And I bet you Dave Portnoy would agree, right? How about this policy? I think Dave Portnoy should take his opinion. There's going to be some swearing in a second, right? Should take his abortion opinion and put his penis in his mouth and shut it, right? How about this for a policy? All of us Bitcoiners say, we'll just live with women, how they figure it out. Let them figure it out. We have literally no role to play. And most, Bitcoiners are majority male, right? Majority male. We're majority male. So what if we just said, we're just going to live with what the women come up with? It's between them. Let them fight it out, right? The only role we ever had to play in this, we had one role: make sure every voice is heard. It's like a typical spectator in an event, right? If one person is getting silenced, you just say, "Oh, that there's some cheating going on over there. They're not getting allowed. They're not allowed to speak," and that's it, right? Because any opinion we might have is really just because we think we can improve on the opinion and result that women come up with. We can't, right? We can't. We can't mansplain them this stuff, and it's complicated. But if we took the position that, Tulsi's a woman, she's got a voice in this debate, let them figure it out. We'll live with what they come up with, right? You just live with what they come up with. But I think that's a way out of the problem for us, right? It's a way out of the problem, and I think to a better solution. Because The main problem with the issue until now, I think, is that no one's voice has been able to be heard, right? There's a lot of silencing on all fronts. So why don't we just embrace the policy that we got nothing to do with it? No skin in this game at all, at all, at all, at all. And I'm sure they will come up with the right answer. I'm sure, right? Because whatever they come up with, it's the right answer for them. So that could be our position, right? Now, we can go on about energy and where things are headed with that, but the most important thing we can do now is also understand where people are going to be attacking Tulsi for changing, right? Tulsi changed parties, so the attacks have begun. So how do we make sure we can see these things in a way that's helpful? Well, Glenn Greenwald pointed this out. There's been a fight the past few days with, what was his name again? Vindman. What was his first name? Vindman. Anyway, Vindman, if you remember, was an analyst on with the NSA. And he's the fella that pushed the first failed impeachment on Trump because of the perfect phone call or whatever. Trump spoke with Zelensky. And the other day, Vindman, when the bridge was on fire, said, I've been dreaming about this moment. He tweeted, I've been dreaming about this moment for years or whatever. Now, a fight breaks out. A journalist called Michael Tracy, who, if you don't follow him, pretty good follow, says, basically criticizing Vindman for that opinion. And he says, Alex Vindman, now running around justifying ISIS-style terror truck bombings after being made aware that civilians were incinerated, was trotted out to investigate impeachment proceedings in 2019 as an avatar for what was called official U.S. policy. What ended up happening was Vindman turned around when Michael Tracy started commenting on Vindman doing this stuff. He turned around and said, Russian agents say what? Russian agents say what? Now, I can deal with these low IQ people all day, right? I can deal with them, but not, and with their bad opinions and all the rest of it, but not if they make me listen to this bro language. Not then, it's too far. It's too far. Say what? It's too far, right? And Glenn Greenwald points it out because it's been happening. Now, everyone says Russian agents say what, right? Russian agents say what about this one guy for criticizing, what's going on over there. I think a fair criticism. He's a journalist himself. Glenn Greenwald points out that this shit has been going on for years. DC neoliberal elites have assigned themselves the license to lie and defame anyone who dissents from neoliberal orthodoxy as Russian agents or Kremlin assets. So we see it again. Tulsi Gabbard announces she's leaving the Democrat Party. A Washington Post columnist, one of the most hardcore partisan loyalists ever to exist on this planet, promptly accuses her of spreading Russian disinformation. It's a pathology with these people. And that is kind of what we see, right? Anyone who disagrees ends up immediately being called a Russian agent. Now, that's happening at the same time that you've got all of this trouble around what's going on with no one knowing what's going on in the war, right? No one knows what's going on in Ukraine and Russia. I know people there, but my sources are terrible. No one's sources are good. It's just a big lie fest. Everyone's scamming over there. You're lucky if a week later you understood really what's going on after an event, right? You've got to wait for fallout. You've got to wait for pieces to move and other things to happen before you can even come close to deciphering what just went on before. I try not to get involved too much and think about nuclear stuff over there because it's too crazy. Right? I can follow a bit of it, but it's too much. Meanwhile, people, of course, are more angry at politicians who are bringing us closer and closer to war without really ever explaining things to American people. And if that's not enough, if it's not enough to turn with these policies, she can also just attack the politicians themselves. Because we got this story now, the SEC, investigating the Bored Ape Yacht Club, the one NFT thing, right? Meanwhile, Nancy Pelosi continues to trade without any repercussions. The Wall Street Journal did a story yesterday that federal officials trade stock in companies their agencies oversee, right? That came out yesterday. The same day, this is a Wall Street Journal written by like 6 people. They all investigated. So we've got the Wall Street Journal talking about how government is basically trading their own book, right? They're trading their own book. Pelosi's trading her own book. Yet the SEC has all this time for the Bored Apes Yacht Club. So that's another one that she can use, basically, right? Bitcoiners, we should never, ever, ever encourage SEC litigation against an NFT, a shitcoin, or anything. The SEC as an adjudicative body is unconstitutional. You can't have bureaucrats writing the laws and then adjudicating in the courts. It doesn't work. And I think it will get torn up eventually. So that's another policy that we can sort of add to the list, because thankfully the SEC has got those Bored Apes on the run. Meanwhile, we've got a free-for-all amongst federal politicians and bureaucrats. Let's see what the chat says. Morning, guys. Justin says, yeah, book coming soon. Yeah, it's going to come. It's going to come. It's a pretty fun story, so I think you guys are going to like it. Dog the Bounty Hunter will continue to have a strong business model. Yeah, I think bounty hunters are they're not going anywhere, guys. They're not going anywhere. All right, team. Well, I hope you like the show. I hope you like my Tulsi policy pivots. And I think we can get her base. Right? I think we can take the Tulsi base and make them Bitcoiners. And I think my plan will get there. I think that'll help them. All right, team.